key one. We also have other ones. We have Digby and Soughton, Marsh Barton when it comes along. So the modernisation of Exeter Central, forecourt improvements, Booking Hall improvements actually probably played a disproportionate role in also helping drive demand, making it more attractive for people like college students. And then, of course, we've had the opening of the new stations, which you've heard about, but obviously they sit in that timeline as key things that have happened over the last decade or more. The timetable. So my bit of it, if Devon build new stations, my bit from a train operator perspective is to deliver the train service. Really, we might play our part in making the case to invest in the railway per se, but obviously operating the service and running the stations is our core bread and butter. Now, as part of the Devon Metro concept, there were to link with the new stations. It was always expected that we would need a series of timetable improvements. And in December 2019, a few months ago, it feels a long time ago now, we introduced a recast to the Devon area, which, as I mentioned before, the user groups will be very familiar with. In fact, anyone who uses the train would have been familiar with, which separated out the Barnstable line and increased the frequency between Exeter and Paignton. And that recast is essentially effectively what that was designed to do, was to enable the Exeter area to operate much more like a metro, with Exmouth services running through on a consistent basis, same destination every hour, so every train, in fact, so it's predictable, to Paignton, which links the two areas of the city that have the most cross-city travel, that will connect to the main employment areas, Digby and Soughton, Exeter Central, Marsh Barton when it opens, and enable the true potential of a relief to the road system that was obviously shown on the map that Andrea was able to show for Marsh Barton. Now, the other benefit of separating those services out was quite simply that the services are very different. Between Exmouth and Paignton, we have much more of a metro type operation, short distances between stations, high numbers of people boarding and alighting, a number of locations. And so running longer trains, but with types of trains that are suited to that kind of metro operation, was also part of it. So it's the combination of the timetable and the rolling stock providing that customer offer. It also provides, although it's not sort of obviously built in, there is capability to accommodate Marsh Barton calls, as you would expect. We haven't yet shown that in any timetables, but clearly it's always been in our thinking. That goes without saying. And the other benefit to Barnstable is the Barnstable line is very different. The Barnstable line is about getting people from North Devon to Exeter and indeed across the city, both quickly, but perhaps more relevantly, in comfort, to be able to do work, to go about one's business. And so separating the Barnstable trains out has allowed them to firstly go to a full hourly frequency, closing gaps in the peaks, and improving the service, so there's more trains arriving in Exeter before 9 a.m. But also to be operated with trains that are comfortable to sit on and work on, and will support the role of that route as a as my colleagues at the TRA would probably say, a secondary main line, rather than the sort of more metro type train service that's required on some of the others. Now, to resource such a timetable change, and I've skipped too far, to resource such a timetable change, and indeed be able to support further service improvements. Clearly, resources are and both in terms of rolling stock and train crew, and indeed other staff, are obviously at the heart of this. And this is the obvious but sometimes probably hidden truth of the rail network, that as we've moved to a position that we've made the kind of fitted as many trains on the network as we can, and we end up with major schemes in our big cities, or smaller schemes in places like here. Actually, one of the key underpinning things is to have a large enough depot so you can maintain your trains, so you can keep them reliable and be able to keep up the capacity that you need. So in the current franchise, we have had a significant, well, I say current, the franchise ended a month ago. We have had a significant increase in the rolling stock base in Exeter as a result of a wider franchise plan. Electrification allowed the introduction of electric trains in the Thames Valley that caused a cascade of rolling stock westwards. That rolling stock allowed the timetable increase, and it allowed the extra capacity, lengthening of trains and so forth. And Exeter Depot has been what has enabled that, because we were effectively crammed to capacity. So if you look at the visual image from when we were designing Exeter Depot, on the right hand side, you've got our large new depot, and in comparison you've got the tiny existing depot on the left hand side with a little blue building I've got the cursor over now, which we were previously maintaining in the local fleet. We will very soon have a completed depot that has a dramatically larger footprint, capability to maintain many more trains, to do so that they're reliable so people can trust them. And that depot also provides a major expansion on our train crew depot. So we've got room for those extra staff that we've recruited, the extra jobs we've put in, to be able to run that improved service. So investment like Exeter Depot, which is one of the largest investments in the areas, well, certainly Exeter's transport per se across the piece in many years, combining very nicely with obviously wider investments on the wider transport network by Devon and others, are key enablers of our ability to do further things, and they are really getting there. You get a sense of the scale when you look at a picture from the inside of the main shed. That's 2 5-car light maintenance roads and a 3-car heavy maintenance road, and a sign that we are finally, for those that have painfully watched it get built over a long period of time, despite COVID, despite everything that's going on, we are opening up bits of that depot gradually, and in fact completing the part that's already open was essential to the implementation of our December timetable change. Now in future, what do we do? And apologies for my mouse keeps skipping forwards when I move slides. So what do we do? Well, quite clearly when Marsh Barton opens, we will look to accommodate it in the timetable. Probably the key thing for accommodating growth in the area is the increase of the service into East Devon's half hourly to Honiton or Axminster. That will give a 2 trains per hour service to Cranbrook, to Pinhoe, all the growth around there. And the way that we that as an industry we would like to achieve that is, first of all, there will be a requirement for extra double track sections. So on the back of the planning process called the continuous modular strategic planning, Network Rail is working with South Western Railway and us on developing the case for that infrastructure. But our intention from an operational standpoint is to extend our Barnstaple services through, so that we provide that cross-Exeter connectivity rather than standalone services, North Devon through to the jobs east of Exeter, and vice versa. Now, as Andrea mentioned, clearly the policy context that we operate in has changed over recent months and years, and actually the Restore Your Railway Fund position has created a very clear opportunity to progress key aspirations like Oakhampton. As Andrew mentioned, the Secretary of State asked us to do some study work, and we've been working with colleagues at the Department for Transport and Network Rail and others to clearly assess the potential of that. Also, it's created a fantastic opportunity to bring forward Tavistock, as Andrew mentioned, and indeed the Cullompton. Our ability to go beyond that is constrained by the existing network. So the existing network through Exeter was remodeled in the 1980s, and I know Christian will pick up a bit more on the constraints, but effectively, just to give an example, for those colleagues who live on the Exmouth branch, there's been a long-held aspiration to increase the frequency to half hourly at Polso Bridge. Now, that seems a simple aspiration, that should be achievable. Yet our interaction with our mainline trains for those Exmouth Paignton workings directly constrains the extra calls that we can put into services on the Exmouth branch. So then when you factor into the potential longer term that I've not directly put on here, but clearly would come into play once we can get these things done in terms of further frequency improvements in the extra area, quite clearly the capacity is a constraint, which segues very neatly into me handing over to Christian. Now, Christian and I work very closely together in his respective role and mine, and that's why we've done this as a joint presentation, to reflect the fact that we are increasingly acting as one railway under our alliance to use the best resources on both sides to progress things. So, Christian.
Thanks, Matt. Brian, how are we doing for time? Are we okay?
Maybe 2 minutes behind schedule.
Okay, we're fine. Okay, brilliant. So as Matt said, my name is Christian Owen. I'm the industry program director responsible for Devon and Cornwall, working for Network Rail, and it's a role that works very, very closely with Great Western Railway and our other train operating colleagues and freight operating colleagues, but also it's kind of a key role in terms of partnering with local communities, but also kind of local authorities such as Devon. And we're working very, very closely with Devon County Council and some of the other authorities with the Devon Metro. So I'm going to talk a little bit about infrastructure and the constraint that brings. So we talked about kind of some of the aspirations for future services and some of the new stations that we've currently already introduced, which is fantastic. But the existing infrastructure starts to become the largest constraint with more and more of these services running. So you can see from the very simple diagram on the right-hand side, if you take all the aspirations over the kind of coming 5-10 years as part of the Devon Metro scheme, we're going to see a huge increase in the number of trains operating not only on the branch lines, but you can start to see that the main line, so the area highlighted yellow on that map, is becoming more and more constrained in terms of the capacity and the capability of running more and more services. And we've got Exeter as a huge hub. So many of those lines join in kind of the main line at Exeter, and Exeter being the hub. But also we've got a secondary hub in the area at Plymouth as well. So one thing that we do know is that the existing 2-track mainline railway that we have through the region does not currently have the capacity to take all the proposed additional services without us doing some necessary interventions. So with that kind of scenario, we've got our aspirations and we've got our kind of constraint of our existing infrastructure. So there are some compromises that could be made. So for example, we could, with a train stopping at more locations, it's obvious that we'll have longer journey times unless we do some kind of intervention. It might be that more a metro service that is acceptable, a selected stopping service, but we start to get to the position where we've got a compromise between kind of longer distance journeys, so the services that make their way up that mainline section up towards kind of London Paddington and up towards Manchester and Bristol, versus the local desire for the metro services as well. So what are our options? So Matt's talked a little bit about kind of rolling stock investment, and we've been really, really lucky in this region that we've benefited from a huge rolling stock cascade as a result of the electrification on the main line between London Paddington and Cardiff. We've also got new IET electric trains running through the region, the bi-mode trains that run themselves down all the way down to Penzance. But the other opportunity is through infrastructure, and Network Rail is a huge infrastructure deliverer. So we own the infrastructure, we maintain it, and we're the custodian of it. And we spend billions every control period. So we work in 5-year control period cycles, renewing the railway. And when we're renewing the railway in certain areas, it is the prime opportunity to deliver enhancements. So the best synergy and the best efficiency we can get is off the back of renewals. So move on to the next slide, please, Matt. So whilst, forgive me, it's outside Devon, but it's a really relevant case study, and it is kind of very key to the Southwest. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of an infrastructure investment that we did in the last control period. So there was a desire by Cornwall Council and also supported by the Peninsula Rail Task Force to run an additional hourly service between Plymouth and Penzance in order to double the capacity between there. And we have the same constraint that we've got in the Devon area, where the existing mainline infrastructure inhibited our ability to run any more services. So for those of you who understand signalling, we have a mechanical signalling system in the Cornwall area. And absolute block essentially means once a train has left the control area of one signal box, nothing can enter into that section until that train has appeared at the next signal box. And those signal boxes might be 14 miles apart in some cases. And obviously that has a massive constraint on the amount of services that we need to run. So what we did was and we're not talking about a really complex novel signalling system here. We're talking that we've introduced the likes of Thameslink, but we developed a scheme that was multi-funded, £25 million, and through the installation of 22 new signal sections and a brand new signalling system, which resulted in as modifying the panel at Plymouth and some new signalling panels at Rosskier and Lostwithiel, we were able to double the capacity of trains that could run through that section. So that's been a great stimulus for the December 19 timetable, where we've now got a double amount of frequency of running trains between Plymouth and Penzance. But it's also laid the foundations for us to build off the back of that in terms of looking at future metroisation of the mid-Cornwall area, which will benefit from this. Now, one of the things which I just kind of like to emphasise really is it's never that simple. So with this infrastructure, investing in infrastructure and putting more services on the infrastructure, it has knock-on effects in terms of some of the other stuff we need to do. So you'll probably see on the fourth bullet point down there, 7 level crossing upgrades needed to be done as part of that scheme. With us doubling the amount of trains, that doubles essentially the risk that we have of each of our level crossings across the railway. So therefore, we're having to modify all our risk assessments for all the level crossings. And with the doubled train frequency, the Alcram score, which is a measure that we use to determine the safety of a level crossing, became beyond an acceptable level. So with an investment in terms of trying to get more trains in the network, we've ultimately had to invest in our network to make it safer for our people as well. So one of the reasons why the cost was higher than it would have been if it was just purely a signalling-based scheme. The scheme was really successful, delivered on time and on budget, and the new services have commenced in May 2019, with the full services commencing in December. So Matt, if you just flick onto the next page, just a few of the photos, just to kind of just talk through some of the stuff we've had to do. I won't go into too much detail, but the bottom right-hand corner is really interesting. What you can see is a mechanical signal box at Rosskier that has had to be converted to a kind of a semi-modern signalling panel with relay interface in order to kind of commission a linkage between the mechanical signalling and modern signalling, in order to drive the new LED signals that you can see on the left-hand side and some of the level crossings that we've put in. So next slide, please, Matt. So the other thing in terms of supporting a metro is, and Matt's referred to this earlier as well, is that if we're going to have more services, stopping at more stations, becoming more frequent, and we're going to have more people travelling, resilience becomes more and more important. We don't want to be having a railway service that's unreliable, and we don't want to be having an asset that's unreliable. And in the Southwest region, as probably most of you will be aware, and I won't go into too much detail, we are susceptible to some of the biggest effects of the changing climate with inland flooding and coastal erosion. And we saw some of that through Dawlish, as many of you will know. Just a couple of photos on the right-hand side that you might want to, I don't know if Matt can zoom in, but just to kind of emphasize some of the complexities that we have in terms of maintaining the infrastructure. So with more trains and more services on our network, our maintenance time gets smaller and smaller. And with the climate change kind of impact getting bigger and bigger, it's proven a real challenge. And it's one of the compromises that we need to consider when we kind of make these additional service investments. So what you can see there is some of our maintenance colleagues abseiling with the supporting net underneath them, supporting a rock face over the Dawlish seawall with a train running under them. Not a particularly pleasant kind of maintenance environment. And the second one is in a light, the one above it is track colleagues doing a bit of packing and inspection during particularly rough storms during a line blockage. So you start to get the picture about some of the challenges we face in terms of maintaining it. So coming on with more trains, sorry, stay on the same slide, please, Matt, sorry. So with more trains with more trains running, we've really recognised that the investment in resilience in this region is so significant, and the government's climate change predictions, which you can see in the table in the bottom left-hand side of the screen, are pretty staggering. They really are. So if you think of the resilience we need to put in the railway to keep it going for the next 100 years, which is what this maps, there's a considerable amount of investment that needs to go into the railway. And Network Rail, alongside the DfT and with support from Devon and Devon County Council and GWR, are delivering what's called the Southwest Rail Resilience Programme. And it's hundreds of millions worth of investment. Some of it's already been done, particularly some of the inland flood resilience, but the next major stages are along the Dawlish to Teignmouth section to try and protect that railway asset and the local communities for the next 100 years. So moving on to the next slide. So as Matt said, we're changing. So historically, over the last kind of 2, 3, 4 maybe control periods, that Network Rail has kind of been a separate entity really to kind of train operating companies and probably a lot of our local communities. And many of you might have seen some of the recent announcements, but Network Rail, we're transforming ourselves as a business. So we're putting ourselves through the Network Rail's Putting Passengers First transformation programme. And what that really means is we're becoming a company that's on the side of passengers and freight users. We're trying to embed ourselves as a customer service provider. That is ultimately what we're there to do. We are there to facilitate a railway to run trains on for the people and the freight of our country. We are an engineering company, we are an asset steward, but our mindset, the reason we exist is customer service, to provide a reliant, resilient railway. So that is coming to the forefront of our minds. We need to provide the best possible service to our passengers and freight. And what we've also done is we've devolved the business. Rather than being a centralised business, we've devolved to 5 new regions, which has enabled us to do local decision making. It brings ourselves closer to passengers and communities we serve. And one of the benefits is that one of the things that we've done as one of the early stages is the creation of industry programme director roles, such as myself, where the role is really to collaborate and work with our train operators and our local communities and authorities to really build the strategy of what the region wants, to try and drive that through. We've been working as an alliance with the Great Western Railway since 2016. I won't go into the detail, but there's a little extract for one of the publications, but that has been really successful, and bringing track and train together is a massive ambition of ours, and it's the only way we're going to get better service and better provision of capacity for our passengers. So these changes have and will enable collaborative working between Network Rail, Great Western Railway and the DfT to kind of really drive the ambitions of kind of the Devon Metro. And so that kind of helps us bring together the industry-owned future strategy. The railway strategy shouldn't be driven by Network Rail or the DfT or GWR or Devon County Council. It should be driven as an industry collectively. And you can see some of the graphics there from the Peninsula Rail Task Force documentation, closing the gap. Just looking at some of the kind of capacity and comfort requirements, resilience requirements, and journey time savings. So these are the real key things that we need to take in terms of our strategy and building for the Devon Metro. And it's not all about the journey. It's often about the experience as well. So it might be fantastic to have a train that runs on time every time, but if you can't get a seat and the train's dirty and you can't get Wi-Fi to connect to your emails the way you're on the train for an hour, that isn't going to encourage people to kind of continually use the service. So we need to consider all three in together. So we talked about resilience, we talked about capacity, and we're currently looking at a study about assessing the 3G, 4G coverage of our railway across all lines within Devon and Cornwall to understand where we have got Wi-Fi issues and 3G and 4G issues. And there's a very easy solution to provide line-side mobile coverage using our GSMR network. And it's something we're really eager to kind of pursue. And it's a great opportunity that could really benefit the Devon Metro. So just to finish off really is that we've now kind of got ourselves into a position where organisationally and structurally and collaboratively, we can shape the future of our region and we can realise the Devon Metro. And coming back to the slide that Andrea presented at the very start, access to new stations and existing stations and even reopening old stations, the capacity to provide longer and more frequent services, and also the quality and comfort and efficiency and the information provided to our passengers is absolutely key to a successful metro system. That's me done.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate that, Christian. An enormously encouraging message. I'm delighted to hear this integration of activities, which I am absolutely sure you're right, is the core solution to all these. And very good to know that Network Rail has moved on to the point of putting passengers first, and indeed freight. I understand the demand for that is very high as well. So thank you very much. We won't take questions at this point, although they are beginning to come through on the chat, but we're running a little bit behind schedule. So Camilla, could I ask you to launch into your presentation about connected cities, please?
First of all, hi everybody.
Brian, I'm going to step in here and try and help Camilla sort out that problem, which we've been trying to do on chat, but unsuccessfully so far. So excuse me, everybody. Camilla, bottom left of your Zoom window, there should be something that says either stop video at the moment with a video camera icon,
Yes.
and an upwards pointing arrow.
Yes.
And then you want the one none.
So
that's it.
That's a lot better. I look human now.
Right. Okay, so I'll just give me a moment, Camilla. I'll put your slides up.
Perfect. Okay. Great. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just sort of quickly describe. Slides don't advance. So,
no, I'll do that for you if you tell me.
Okay,
yep.
Next one. Yeah, so what I'm going to cover, and what I need to do, just a moment, I've got to get rid of my little gallery thing. There we are. So I'm going to cover a sort of outline of what the Connected Cities is about, the sort of goals and opportunities that arise if you adopt this methodology, and the sort of key principles, and then we're going to show you a bit about how that is applied to Devon next. So, I mean, first of all, the core principle really is of the Connected Cities is actually focusing growth along existing rail corridors. So either underused corridors, highly used corridors for that matter, and closed lines. So it's basically looking at the fact that we've got an existing railway system, and that we are saying the growth really should be happening along those railway corridors. Next. So the core philosophy is to think about our future growth, this UK's future growth requirements, but in a way that is low carbon, so low carbon living, designing out car dependency and designing communities that rely on public transport. And what this system does is it brings together sort of through good public transport, town planning and urban design. Next. So the type of communities that the Connected Cities model anticipates is sort of along the Garden City principles. They're moderately sized settlements, as I said earlier, not car dependent, but very good public transport access. And it's sort of often linking towns and facilities with a maximum of a 15-minute journey. So that 15-minute journey would be by public transport, or if they're very close, it could be walking and cycling. But I mean, that is the principle, is that nothing that you need if you live in this particular community should be more than 15 minutes away by some mode or other. Next. And it's very much about sort of creating livable neighborhoods. So it's sort of the Garden City principle of lots of green within the settlement area where people are living, the residential areas. It's quiet, it's socially equitable, it's where people would like to live and to meet and to mingle with their neighbors and local community, and where children can play in the street, and everything is within walking distance of a station. So at the very worst, you'd be a 15-minute walk away. You might actually be a lot closer. Next. So these diagrams are just a few, just to give you an idea of what the Connected Cities principles. So the top left one, describes that the center, so the red line, the red arc is supposedly an existing railway corridor, that you'd put a station there with a sort of core to this new settlement, which is mixed use and high density. And then you have a sort of what's called a ped shed center, which is the center of this sort of new settlement. The pink wedges show how residential would be accommodated, but they are sort of separated by green wedges, so the green of the countryside can come right into the core of the city. It also has a sort of, in the middle, if you like, between the center and the outer extremities, a sort of core circulation route of local distribution roads. And that's where you would get all your local facilities, sort of shops and pubs and whatever is happening there. And when you put all those principles together, you get a pinwheel, something like the one on the right. And that typically, you won't be able to read it probably, but there's a little key at the bottom which sort of says that this particular example would probably accommodate something in the region of 22,000 people. So it's a new settlement. It could be a new station on an existing railway line. And this is how you do it. Next, please. So here, for example, you can see on the left, we've got an existing town with the yellow station being the existing station that serves that area. But by putting sort of 2 new stations at the periphery of the existing settlement, you could then expand out. And you could potentially link up several small settlements, all could join together if they wanted to become a connected city. So by individually each one growing, and then they all sort of, there is a sort of overall strategic plan that says where perhaps education is or where medical facilities are and so on, retail, leisure, and then they all form together as a cluster, but separated, but all connected by a 15-minute railway journey at the most, all the facilities, and you get a connected city. Next. And this just shows that wherever they are, basically you are designing for no more than a 15-minute journey. Next. So these are just some of examples in Devon. So looking at the Devon Metro and just showing how it might look if you actually apply the Connected Cities principle. And basically it's might be difficult for you to see the legend, but I mean, basically we've got sort of existing stations, which are the yellow ones, and then you've got sort of orange ones, which would be sort of a hub settlement, and then you've got a proposed new station. So that yeah, I mean, you've basically got the proposed new stations that the Devon Metro is proposing, but then there's also, and you can't see this very clearly because the green and the blue look very similar, but also proposed new stations that the Connected City is suggesting you could add in over and above what's already being proposed. Next. So I'll just go through these quite quickly, but this is what Greater Exeter might look like. Next. And Greater Plymouth. Again, you know, here you've got already a lot of stations in close proximity on the western side of Plymouth. Next. And Greater Exmouth, so up the sort of watershed. Next. And this is the line up to Greater Barnstable. Next. I'm going through this very quickly because Brian is going to explain more detail the thinking and the applying the methodology. Newton Abbot, next. Calstock, next. Copplestone, next. And then we've got Oakhampton, next. And Newton Abbot, and next. So this is in more detail, so zooming in, this Totnes, showing the sort of radius of a new settlement of the Pedshed, and showing that you can probably just about make out the yellow line on across the watershed and how that works. So some of the development zone would obviously still be watershed and therefore natural blue-green environment, but it's within So you have, you develop obviously the dry land, so to speak. Next. And this is Dartington. Again, there you're seeing the existing and then proposed new development to the left, or to the west, I should say. Next. And this is Darrington, similar thing, smaller settlement, but you can sort of see, I mean, same size settlement, but smaller, I mean, less complicated, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Next. And that's it. So I'll hand over now to Brian, who will explain to you in more detail the slides that apply to Devon and the thinking behind it. Thanks. Next. Or actually, you probably want to go back to the beginning of the Devon slides so that Brian can talk to them. Yeah, that's probably good. Thank you.
Okay, right. Well, this is Exeter Connected City, and this is, as Camilla pointed out, based on 50-minute travel times. Although it looks, it's surprising, obviously, if you have a large number of stations, your travel time is slowed down. So could we go forward again, please, through these slides? And again, forward, 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 forwards. Ah, yeah, okay, good. We've included one more, please. Oakhampton. Keep going, please. Even though at present it doesn't really have a service, but it's always been part of the aspirations of Devon to develop this and maintain it. And of course, there is actually track to the west of here, but that's a different issue altogether. The circle there, which is in light blue, is actually a proposed station that's on the Devon Metro map and is intended to service a new housing settlement. And so, again, we felt that it was important to include it in this. So next, please. Greater Newton Abbot Connected City, potentially. Now, all of the yellow circles here represent existing railway stations and potential development areas around them, each of which is 1 kilometre in radius. The two green ones, however, represent what we think are potential new settlements, because one of the requirements of Connected Cities is that it looks at the long-term growth that's taking place in this country. And by 2050, there's, according to the Office of National Statistics, there's going to be more than 80 million people in this, in the UK. And as a consequence, we have to find somewhere to put all these people. The intention of the Connected Cities is that each area should take its pro rata share of the growth, or at least plan for it. And if it chooses not to plan for it, well, then it has to provide means of assisting other parts of the country to take that growth for them. So if we could move on, please, to the next. So this is Totnes. That already has a station. We would propose development around this station within 1 kilometre of various kinds. First of all, preserve anything that's good there, which is going to be the bulk of it in this case, and particularly to preserve areas that are prone to flooding. The indication on the right is where the flooding would occur. So there's only a limited growth capacity within the area immediately around and within Totnes. Next slide, please. However, in Oz, the right-hand yellow circle is the Totnes circle we were just looking at. The left-hand one is a potential news development around the new station at the point where the railway is. And this is not affected by the flooding area. And so potentially there could be a settlement of at least 30,000 people in this area, all of whom will be within the critical 15 minutes for walking. Next, please. The third kind of proposal that we put forward is for entirely new standing settlements that aren't an extension of any existing. Darrington is not a connected city, actually, it's just a ped shed, but it will be a new settlement, again, with about 30,000 people, and it's roughly halfway between Newton Abbot and Totnes on the line. I realise, of course, from everything that's gone before that this would increase the stopping time, but one of the great advantages of building a new settlement in the middle of a stretch of line, is that you can take the opportunity to use Garden City principles of capturing the land value that comes from the increase in the value of land when housing and planning permission is granted. And that goes a long way towards contributing to the cost of upgrading the railway, including providing things like parking, passing spaces and so on, and additional 4 tracking sections. So this is the kind of approach that we're considering. Now, we moved on to the end of our time. We were almost spot on 4:35. So at this point, I would simply ask you to, if you're more interested in the concept, go to the Connected Cities website, which is www.connectedcities.co.uk, or if you simply type it into Google, please type Connected Cities as all one word, and you will be taken straight to our page. There is a free book about this to be downloaded, and we're more than happy for people to do exactly that. So at this point, I'd like to thank all of the speakers enormously. We do have quite a few questions that have come through, but as I say, we're spot on time. So the proposal here is to take our 15-minute breakout. Now, during this time, we would ask you to think about which of the speakers you would like to have a conversation with or be part of a group having a conversation with when we come back in 15 minutes at 1:45. If you wish to be with Councillor Andrew Davis, please type 1 into chat and send that off. With Matt Barnes, please type 2 into that. With 3, if you wish to be with Christian, or 4 if you would like to speak to Camilla. And as I say, there will be about 15 minutes of chat in these breakout rooms, and then we will come back into a general discussion at the end. One thing I would also ask of you throughout this is that if after this event is over, you would like to have your email included in the list of people who attended, we would be very grateful if you could simply type your email into the chat. That will mean that we'll know who is prepared to have their email distributed and who isn't, which makes life much simpler for us and enables the continuing networking, which is obviously a natural part of these kind of events. So thank you very much. I trust you will have coffee, or maybe on today will be a lemonade, or who knows. But anyway, do take the opportunity to have a coffee break, and we will all come back together again at 4:45. Yes, just after 4:45. Thank you very much.
Hi, Helen. Are you there?
Right.
Okay, Brian. I'm going to mute everybody except Helen, if that's okay, because she's going to help me do the breakout rooms.
Ah, right. Okay. Well, so I'm muted. I will stop my video for the time being then, and I will take advantage of the break to actually have a break.
Okay. See you later, Brian.
Do you want me to read them out to you?
Please, Helen.
Okay, you ready?
Just hold on. I'm just going to stop the live stream so that this doesn't go to YouTube.
Yeah.